The snow fell softly on that February morning, blanketing Timberridge with a cold so deep it stole one's breath. Ruth Winslow stepped out of the general store. The flour sacks, originally flour sacks, misspelled flowers. Heavy in her arms, she saw the children first. Two small figures knelt in the snow across the street. Their screams pierced the silence. The boy, perhaps 8 years old, shook a man's shoulder. The younger girl cried for her papa. Ruth's boots hit the icy boardwalk before her mind caught up. She crossed the street, dropping her supplies in the snow. The man lay face down, motionless. She recognized him as Dawson, the widower who lived 5 miles south and had worked himself half to death since his wife's passing 3 years ago. A crowd gathered, but no one came closer. Miss Brennan, the town matchmaker, clutched her shawl. The poor man worked 3 days without sleep, trying to finish that fence before the next storm. "Someone help him," Ruth said, kneeling. She pressed 2 fingers to his neck. Weak, but steady. "It's not proper for a widow," someone muttered. Ruth ignored them. She looked at the boy. "What's your name?" "Tommy," he whispered. "Is Papa dying?" "Not if I can help it, child, not today." She turned to the blacksmith. "Get my wagon now." The man hesitated, looking at the others. Ruth's voice sharpened. Now he moved. Ruth and the blacksmith lifted Levi onto the wagon bed, his body limp and feverish. The children climbed in beside their father. Ruth gathered the reins. Warren Kent, the banker, stepped forward. "Mrs. Winslow, this is highly irregular. So is letting a man freeze to death while his children watch." She snapped the reins. The wagon lurched forward as they disappeared down the snowy path. Miss Brannan whispered to Kent, "That woman has always been too independent for her own good." Kent's eyes narrowed. "Independence has a price. She'll learn it out here. You don't judge a person's past. You judge what they do when the snow comes." Ruth had heard these words from her late husband. She lived by them now. Behind her, Tommy held his sister close. Hope buried her face in her brother's coat. She was still crying. Ruth didn't look back. She drove towards her cabin, towards warmth, towards the decision she had just made without thinking. The sky darkened. More snow was on the way. Levi woke up between unfamiliar walls, smelling herbal tea. His head throbbed. Firelight danced over roughly hewn logs, where children's laughter echoed. He turned his head and winced. Tommy stood next to a woman by the stove, stirring something in a pot. Hope sat at a wooden table arranging corn husk dolls. The woman turned around. "Ruth Winsler." Levi tried to sit up. "Quiet," she said, walking to the bed. She pressed a hand on his shoulder, firm, not gentle. "You have a fever and 3 days of exhaustion. The blacksmith said you hadn't slept." "I can't," his voice broke. "I can't be here. People will talk. My children. Your children need a living father, not a dead hero." Ruth's tone was flat, practical. She handed him a tin cup. "Drink willow bark tea." He drank, reluctantly, but the warmth helped. Outside, the wind howled. Snow rattled against the windows. The storm broke an hour after we arrived here. "Come on," Ruth said. "We're stuck for a while. 3 days, maybe more." Panic rose in Levi's chest. "I have to go back. The cattle, I've already brought them into my barn. Your cow, your 2 horses, the chickens." Tommy helped. She nodded to his son, who beamed with pride. Levi's throat tightened. He had sworn to himself, had sworn to his wife's memory, that he would never again need the help of another woman, that he would raise his children alone, prove that he was enough, but he was not enough. The fever, the exhaustion, the breakdown, all evidence of his failure. "Rest," Ruth said. "The storm doesn't ask for your permission." That night, the 3rd night, Levi couldn't sleep. He watched Ruth through the doorway. She was in the barn, splitting wood by lantern light. Her movements were efficient, tireless. Scars marked her hands. Years of hard work. Tommy whispered from his sleeping pallet, "Dad, will she be our new mom?" Levi's chest ached. "No, son, we're just borrowing her kindness. She's kind. She doesn't treat us like we're broken." Levi closed his eyes. His wife's last words echoed. Promise me you'll find them a mother. He had promised. But every woman the town suggested felt wrong. They pitted his children, pitted him. Ruth pitted no one. The storm broke at dawn. Pale sunlight filtered through the windows. Levi stood, shaky but determined. We have to go. She bundled the children warmly, packed their things. As Levi lifted Hope into his arms, the girl looked back at Ruth. Will we see you again? Ruth's face softened. Just for a moment. I expect so, child. They left. Levi didn't look back, though everything in him wanted to. Pride is a cold companion in winter, he learned the truth in it. A man is only as rich as the people who stand by him in a storm. Another of his late wife's sayings. Levi wondered if she had sent Ruth to him, if promises could be kept in unexpected ways. A week later, Levi returned to Ruth's cabin. He carried a toolbox and his father's old hammer. She was mending a bridle on the porch. Her hands were steady. I've come to pay you. Ruth didn't look up. Don't recall asking for payment. You need a new roof. Saw the leak over the kitchen and your woodpile is low. Then she met his gaze. Her eyes were gray as the winter sky, watchful. I don't owe you charity. It's not charity. It's how things are done out here. We help each other. It's how we survive. Ruth stood slowly. Fine, but that makes us even. No debts on either side. Agreed. He worked all morning. Ruth watched him from the window, unable to stop herself. His hands moved as Samuel's had, carefully skilled. Every movement reminded her of building this cabin with her husband 5 years ago. Samuel dead for 2 winters, shot by claim jumpers when he rode out to check the fences. She had found his body frozen in the snow. The town had whispered. She should have stopped him, should have kept him home, as if his death was her fault. She had learned then to rely on no one, to need no one, to survive alone. But watching Levi work, something old and buried stirred in her chest. She pushed it down. Levi had his own ghosts. His wife Grace had died 3 years ago giving birth to Hope. She had bled to death in her bed, whispering her last words. Promise me you'll find them a mother. Someone kind. Someone who will love them. He had promised. But he had failed. Every woman Miss Brennan introduced him to treated his children like wounded creatures. They offered pity, not love. Ruth pitied no one. She expected the children to work, to learn, to stand on their own 2 feet. Tommy had blossomed in those 3 storm-bound days. Around noon, Tommy and Hope came running across the snow. Papa, can we play by the pond? Stay off the ice. Levi shouted. It's not safe, but children forget warnings. 20 minutes later, Hope's scream tore through the air. Levi dropped his hammer. Ruth stormed out of the cabin. They reached the pond together. Hope had followed Tommy onto the ice. Cracked beneath her. She broke through and disappeared into the black water. Levi and Ruth plunged in without hesitation. The cold was like a fist closing around Ruth's lungs. She grabbed Hope, pushed her towards Levi. He caught the girl, dragged her to the shore. Ruth followed, gasping. They stumbled into the cabin. Ruth stoked the fire while Levi stripped the children of their wet clothes and wrapped them in all the blankets they had. Hope's lips were blue. Tommy was trembling violently. Ruth made hot tea, forced it into their hands. Levi knelt before them, his voice breaking. You both could have died. We're sorry, Papa, Tommy whispered. Levi pulled them close. Ruth turned away. Her own hands were trembling. She remembered losing 3 babies, stillborn. Everyone remembered the silence after each birth, the weight of empty arms. I can't do this alone anymore, Levi said softly. Ruth froze. She didn't turn around. I know you want to be strong, he continued. I know you think needing help makes you weak, but it doesn't. It just makes you human. Ruth's hands clenched. Don't do it, she whispered. What? She looked at him. He stood up. All heads turned. Levi walked down the center aisle and crossed the invisible line that separated Ruth from the respectable families. He reached her pew. Ma'am, is this seat taken? Ruth's eyes widened. Her hands trembled in her lap. It's been empty a long time, Mr. Dawson. I suppose it's yours if you want it. He sat down. Tommy and Hope climbed out of their pew and squeezed in beside Ruth. Hope took her hand. The church grew quiet. Miss Brennan fanned herself. Warren Kent's eyes narrowed from his seat near the front. The preacher stumbled through the rest of his sermon. After the benediction, people streamed out quickly, avoiding eye contact. But old Henry Doyle, a rancher whose wife had died the previous year, remained next to Levi. He shook his hand. That took courage, son, the kind that counts. Outside, the spring sun was warm. Ruth took a deep breath. Her shoulders relaxed. Then Warren Kent appeared. Miss Winslow, we need to talk about your mortgage. It's overdue. Ruth's face went pale. I'll have the payment next month. The wool. I'm afraid next month won't be enough. Kent's smile was cold. Come see me this week. We'll discuss the options. He walked away. Levi turned to Ruth. What's he talking about? Nothing I can't handle. But her voice trembled. Tommy tugged on Levi's sleeve. Dad, why is everyone so mean to Miss Ruth? Levi knelt down because they're afraid. Son, of anything different, anything that challenges how they think things should be. Hope looked up at Ruth. You don't make me afraid. Ruth's eyes filled. She touched the girl's hair. Thank you, sweet child. The land doesn't care about your heartbreak. Cares about whether you can work it. Samuel had said that once. Ruth had lived by it, but now she wondered if working the land was enough when the land could be pulled out from under your feet. That night, alone in her cabin, Ruth pulled out her mortgage papers. 3 months overdue. She had spent everything on feed and seed, banking on the wool harvest, but Kent could initiate foreclosure at any time. 5 miles away, Levi lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Miss Brennan's words echoed. The widow from Denver is coming on the spring train. He didn't want the widow from Denver. He wanted Ruth, but wanting wasn't having. Not in a world that condemned every step, every choice. Midnight. Ruth woke to desperate knocking. She grabbed her rifle, opened the door. Levi stood there, snow in his hair. It's the mare. She's having trouble. Ruth asked no questions. She pulled on her boots, grabbed her coat, and followed him to the barn. The pregnant mare lay on her side, breathing heavily. Ruth knelt, her hands gliding over the swollen belly. Foal's wrong. Breech. We have to turn it. Can you do that? I've done it before. She rolled up her sleeves. Bring me hot water, clean rags, and keep her calm. They worked in the circle of lantern light. Ruth's hands disappeared into the mare, feeling for the foal's position. Sweat ran down her face. The mare cried out. Quiet, girl, Levi murmured, stroking her neck. Quiet now. An hour passed. Then 2. Ruth's arms ached. Then, finally, she felt the shift. The foal turned. Got it. Here it comes. The foal emerged in a gush of fluid and membrane. Ruth cleared its nose, rubbed it with straw. After a terrifying moment, it gasped, then breathed. The mare struggled to her feet, nudging her baby. The foal's legs were wobbly, but it stood. Ruth leaned back, exhausted. Her hands trembled. Levi handed her a rag. She wiped her face. You saved them both, he said softly. Ruth watched the foal drink. Tears suddenly and uncontrollably ran down her cheeks. Samuel and I, her voice broke. We lost 3 babies, all stillborn. I held them, named them, buried them. This is the first birth I've seen that didn't end in death. Levi knelt beside her.
I'm sorry.
I didn't know. No one knows. After the 3rd time, the town said I was cursed, that God was punishing me for something. She laughed bitterly. Maybe it was him. Maybe that's why Samuel died too. Ruth, my wife's last words, Levi said, were, promise me you'll find them a mother. I promised, but every woman the town suggests feels like betrayal, as if I'm replacing Grace. Ruth looked at him. What do you want, Levi? You, he said simply. I don't want you because you're practical or decent or what the town expects, but because you're strong where I'm weak. Because my children laugh when you're around. Because you don't need me, but you still chose to help. I'm not a replacement for your wife. No, you're not, he touched her hand. Maybe they wanted us to live. Ruth, not just survive. Live, the words hung between them. The foal stumbled, found its footing, and drank again. Ruth leaned towards him. Levi's breath hitched. Their faces were only inches apart. Then Ruth abruptly pulled back. I can't. I'm not ready. I'm sorry, she stood up, fleeing the barn. Levi remained, watching the newborn foal, understanding that some things, perhaps the most important, came the hard way. Out here, in spring, we plant what we hope to harvest in autumn. Sometimes the seeds are second chances. But first the soil had to thaw, the frost had to break, and that took time, patience, and more courage than facing any storm. Warren Kent arrived at Ruth's cabin on a cold April morning. He rode a noble black horse. His scribe followed him with saddlebags full of papers. Ruth was repairing the fence when she saw them. She put down her tools and wiped her hands on her apron. Miss Winslow, Kent said without dismounting. We need to talk about your mortgage. I told you next month. The wool won't be enough. He nodded to his scribe, who produced the document. You are 3 months behind. I could initiate foreclosure today. Ruth's hands clenched into fists. The law says I have 6 months. The law says I have discretion. Kent finally dismounted, stepping close. However, I am willing to be generous, to forgive the entire debt, to wipe it clean. In exchange for what? His smile was cold. Marriage, Miss Winslow. You need a husband. I need a wife, it's practical. Ruth Megan turned around. Kent was rich, respected, and completely devoid of warmth. His first wife had died quietly and unhappily. I would rather lose my country than sell myself. Kmeen hardened. Pride is expensive. Where will you go when I foreclose? Back east to beg from family? There's nothing here for single women. You know that. He got back on. 30 days, Mrs. Winslow thinks carefully. They rode away. Pruth trembled with mud, rage, and fear. That same morning in town, Miss Brannan Lay intercepted him in front of the mercantile office. The widow from Denver is coming on the spring train. 2 weeks, Mr. Dawson. I've arranged for you to meet her. She is 1326, educated, plays piano. Perfect for your children. Levi's thoughts raced. Ruth would lose her land. She would have nowhere to go. If he married the woman from Denver, he would have stability, money. He could help Ruth as a neighbor without scandal. It made sense. It was practical. I'll think about it, he heard himself say. Miss Brennan beamed. Wonderful. You're making the right choice. That evening, Ruth came to town for supplies. She had to see Levi, tell him about Ken's ultimatum. Perhaps they could find a solution together. She passed the church. Through the open door, she heard voices. If I marry the woman from Denver, Lay said just now, I will have stability, money. I can help Ruth without scandal as a neighbor. It's the right thing to do, said Preacher Morrison. Sometimes the right thing requires a sacrifice, my son. Ruth didn't wait to hear more. She walked back to her wagon, got on, and drove home through the gathering darkness. Her chest felt hollow. She had been a fool. She had allowed herself to hope, to imagine a future. But Levi would do what was proper, what the town expected, and she would lose everything. On his own farm, Levi stared at the ceiling that night. He had said the words, but they tasted like ashes. The right sacrifice. But what if doing the right thing meant choosing the wrong thing? When a man talks about what is proper, it usually means he has forgotten what is right. His father had told him that years ago. Levi began to understand. Outside, spring rain began to fall. Cold, relentless, and washing nothing clean. For days later, Levi was looking for Rue. She hadn't been in town, hadn't answered when he knocked on her door. Her wagon stood unused in the barn. He found her kneeling at her husband's grave in the cemetery. Rain soaked her coat. She was crying the first tears she had shed since Samuel's death. Levi approached slowly. Ruth, she didn't look up. Go away, Neen. He knelt beside her in the mud. Talk to me. I told Samuel I would never love again, her voice broke. I told him I would maintain this place alone, that to love him meant to remain faithful. But I'm so tired, Lee. I'm so tired of being strong, of being alone, of pretending I don't need anyone. You don't have to pretend. Not with me. Yes, I do, because you're marrying the woman from Denver. You're doing what I heard. They finally looked at each other, eyes red. And I will lose my land because I was foolish enough to hope. Lissa's heart broke open. I'm not marrying her. I heard you in church. I know what you heard. And I was wrong. He took her hands. My wife told me to find a mother for the children. I thought that meant replacing her, finding someone who looked right, acted right. But you're not a replacement, Rue. You are the answer to her prayer. She wanted them to be loved. You love them and I want them, Ruth whispered. I want all of you, but the town knows. Let them come. We will fight together. He pulled her close. I don't want what's proper. I don't want what's practical. I want you and me and these children and this damn foal and muddy boots and morning coffee and growing old together. Ruth pressed her face against his chest. What if we make a mistake? What if we're not ready? We'll never be ready, but we'll be together. That's enough. She looked up at him. Rain mixed with tears on her face. The town will crucify us. Kent will ruin me. Let him try. Thunder rolled above them. Ruth thought of Samuel, of the promises she had made over his grave. But perhaps promises changed. Perhaps love was not betrayal. Perhaps opening her heart again honored what she had lost, rather than diminishing it. I'm scared, she said. Me too, Levi smiled. We'll be scared together. She kissed him then, fiercely, desperately, full of all the loneliness and hope she had buried for 2 years. He held her tight, as if she were the last solid thing in a world of flood and storm. When they broke apart, Ruth laughed, a rough, real sound. We're a mess, the best kind of mess. They stood together before the graves, his wife, her husband. One honored the past while choosing the future. The rain poured down. They were soaked, muddy, cold, and for the first time in years, Ruth felt warm. A good horse knows the way home, even in the dark. Sometimes you just have to trust and ride. They walked back to her cabin hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next. Together, the town hall was packed. Every citizen of Timber Ridge had come for the foreclosure hearing. Ruth stood alone before the council table. Warren Kent sat at the head. The mortgage papers were spread before him like weapons. Levi entered with Tommy and Hope. Whispers went through the crowd. Miss Brennan clutched her shawl in horror. Kent rapped on the table. Miss Winslow, you had 30 days. Do you have the payment? No, then according to the terms of your mortgage, I am authorized to foreclose and seize the property. He looked at the council members. Unless you accept my previous offer, Ruth's jaw tightened. I will not marry you. Then you leave me no choice. Wait, Levi stepped forward. He held a rolled document. I offer my property as collateral for Miss Winslow's debt, gasps. Kent's smile faded. You would ruin yourself for a woman you're not even married to. I would do it for my family. Tommy stood on his chair. He's my dad. Miss Ruth saved Dad's life. She taught me how to read. She is our family. Hope's small voice carried through the room. She braids my hair like Mom used to. I love her. Miss Brannan dabbed her eyes. Several women murmured in agreement. Ken's face reddened. This is highly irregular. The council will hear all options. Elder Henry Doyle stood up from the back. Mr. Kent, you are a rich man. This debt means nothing to you. But to destroy this woman, that is not justice, that is cruelty. The law allows compassion. Deal stepped forward. My wife died last year. I know what loneliness costs. These two have found something decent in this harsh world. I will not stand by and watch it be destroyed by greed. He placed a cashier's check on the table. I will cover Miss Winslow's mortgage in full. Kent stared at the check. The amount was correct, more than correct. He had been outmaneuvered. Preacher Morrison stood up. Perhaps we should ask ourselves who among us survives winter alone. Who has not needed help? Mercy, a second chance. Ken's scribe whispered something urgently to him. Other council members shifted uncomfortably. Public opinion had turned. Kent gathered his papers. This is irregular, but I see the council lacks the backbone for proper business. He stood up. Miss Winslow, your mortgage is paid. Congratulations. He stormed out. The room erupted in conversation. Ruth couldn't move. Levi took her hand. Tommy and Hope rushed to her, wrapping their arms around her waist. Elder Doyle smiled. "Young lady, you have good people around you. Don't forget that." "I won't, sir." "Thank you." Miss Brennan approached, surprising everyone. "Miss Winslow, I may have been mistaken. You were good to these children. Sometimes love finds its own way." Ruth nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Outside, the spring sun was warm. Hope tugged at Ruth's skirt. "Does this mean you're staying?" "Yes, sweet child, I'm staying." Tommy grinned. "Forever." Ruth looked at Levi. He smiled, squeezed her hand. "Forever," she said. "In a harsh land, a man is judged by who stands with him when the wolves circle." The town had judged, and for once they had chosen correctly. The wedding would be quiet, they decided. Just family and Elder Doyle. But today, as they stood in the spring sunshine with the children between them, it felt as if the hardest part was over. They had faced the town, they had faced their ghosts, they had chosen each other. Now came the building, the real work, the life. And they were ready. July came with wildflowers and warm wind. The cabin had changed, expanded, repaired, remade. Levi and Ruth had worked side by side all spring, adding a room for the children, repairing the roof, planting a garden that now teemed with life. The foal ran in circles in the pasture, long-legged and strong. Chickens pecked in the yard. The fence stood sturdy. Ruth sat on the porch with her morning coffee, watching Levi teach Hob to ride. Tommy knelt in the garden, carefully weeding around the tomatoes. They had married 3 weeks after the town hall hearing. A quiet ceremony. Elder Doyle officiated, the children as witnesses. Vows spoken under a cottonwood tree. Ruth wore a simple blue dress. Levi gave her a silver ring he had kept. She wore it now, turning it absently on her finger. Inside the cabin, 2 candles stood on the mantelpiece, one for Samuel, one for Grace. Every evening, Ruth lit both. Levi had helped her create a memorial garden on her old property, now sold to a young couple from Nebraska. They had planted roses there, left stones with engraved names. Honoring the past did not mean living in it. That was the hardest lesson, but they were learning it. The town had approached, slowly. Miss Brennan brought preserves and asked for gardening advice. Families invited them to Sunday dinners. Warren Kent had left Timberridge in shame, taking a job in Helena. Elder Doyle visited often. He and Levi had become friends. 2 widowers who had found reasons to keep living. Hope's laughter rang out as the horse trotted. "I'll do it, Mama Ruth."
Im reading, Mama Ruth.
The name had come to the children quite naturally. Ruth had cried the first time and held them tight. Tommy ran to the porch. "Mama Ruth, the tomatoes are getting big. Can we ken them? Just like Grandma Doyle taught us." "We can do that, darling, this afternoon." She had never carried a child, but these 2 were now completely and utterly hers. Some families were born, some were built. Hers was built from storm and struggle, from the decision for love instead of fear. Levi joined her on the porch, sitting next to her with his own coffee. His arm went around her shoulders. "Happy?" he asked. "Scared," she said honestly. "And happy, both at once. That's how you know it's real." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the children. The morning sun warmed Ruth's face. She thought of the breakdown in the snow, the blizzard, the cemetery in the rain. Every difficult moment had led here. "Tell me the story," Hope said at dinner that evening. "About how you and Dad saved each other." Ruth smiled. "Well, darling, it started with a breakdown in the snow and ended with a stand in the town hall. But it actually began long before that with 2 people who had lost everything and learned that they could still build something new." Levi squeezed her hand under the table after dinner. After the children were asleep, Ruth and Levi sat on the porch, watching the fireflies dance. The air smelled of hay and roses. "I'm not afraid anymore," Ruth whispered. "Me neither." She leaned against him, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong. Tomorrow they would wake up early, tend to the animals, work in the garden, build the life they had chosen. Good things came the hard way, through winter storms, muddy spring, and the long work of building something that lasts. The stars revolved above them. The prairie stretched dark and wide around them. But here on this porch, in this circle of light, they were home. The fence stood strong. The garden bloomed, and two broken people, healed by love and work, looked out into the night together. Finally, the very end.